Truro Diocese website. So, Catherine, welcome.
Hello.
Thank you very much. I'll hand over to you, and thank you for being here today and telling us your story.
No problem, you're very welcome. I was involved with a Friends organisation for about 15 or 16 years. Back in 2002, the church roof in Stoke Climsland quite urgently needed repair, and that was when the Friends organisation was put together to raise money to mend the roof. The charity was registered with the Charities Commission. To raise the money, the Friends group ran an outdoor concert, which soon turned into a 3-day music festival with about 4,000 people coming. And more than enough money was raised to repair the roof. In fact, we raised about £120,000, and it was, that aspect of it was an enormous success. If I had my time again, would I be involved in a Friends organisation, and would the church start a Friends organisation? The answer to that would be no, for several reasons. I think, first of all, I would guard against setting up a separate charity. First of all, you're making work for yourself. You then have to have trustees and annual meetings and formal minutes, when you could be using that time more fruitfully. I'd also say to people, what question are you trying to answer with a Friends organisation? So what is the problem? If the problem is that you have major work to do on the church, then yes, set up a group adjunct from the PCC. If it's something like a roof, then yes, engage with the wider community, and the wider community will get involved for things that are fundamental to the fabric of a church. But one of the things that we found was that if you then move on to trying to modernise your church, then actually what you will get from your wider community is antagonism, anger. In my experience, if it's to do with the modernisation of a church, the wider community doesn't really want that. They don't want you to take pews out because, where are they going to hang the flowers when their daughter gets married? So therefore, having this Friends organisation, it's then very difficult on how to spend the money. The people that were, if you like, supportive of what you were trying to do might, in mending the roof so the church doesn't get wet, might not agree with you if you then move on to do something else. My advice would be to, first of all, ask that question. What is it you want to do? So let's say your roof needs repair, then yes, to have a social event to people adjunct to the PCC, separate to the. I'd also say that in terms of raising money, you will only, not because you're raising money to fix the roof, but because it was a great event and it just happened to be raising money for the fabric of the church. But that wasn't why people came. In Christmas cards, or it's very difficult doing small events. So if you really want to raise a lot via a group of people within the community, put on an event that people want to go to because it's a great event, not because it's raising money. I would say don't become a separate charity because you are just making work for yourself. Church do loads of things in order to come alongside people in the community. And a church should be doing that anyway. So I don't see a Friends organisation as a route to getting involved in the community. I think that if you have the Friends, a separate Friends organisation, it can actually stop a church from doing things that get them in the community because they think, oh, we've got Friends, we've ticked that box. Whereas I think you know, it's vital for a church to be doing things that allow you to come alongside. If you're thinking, why are you doing it? If it's because you want to get closer to the local community, just do that. You don't to raise money. If it's an essential thing that is going to stop the, then absolutely some aspects are more important to people who are not Christian disciples than they are to people who are. From that perspective, go out there, get involved in what they're doing. But I would guard against a separate friends organisation.
We'll be, as I say, having a much bigger discussion around this a bit later on, but just in case if there are any pressing ones before she leaves us. Otherwise, we'll let you go back to work.
Marvellous.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Yeah, the Case Short has said Friends Group also need their own insurance. Absolutely, they do. Whereas if you run an event, say, as part of the church, or church insurance will cover you as part of that. But yeah, we had to have our own insurance, and yeah, I would guard against setting up a separate charity.
Great.
Thanks, Andrew and Anne. I hope you have a discussion, everybody. Sorry, I've got to go. I've got to run staff appraisals all afternoon.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Really appreciate
No
you coming
problem at
on.
all.
Good to have you.
Okay,
Thank
bye-bye.
you. Thanks, Catherine. Goodbye. Thank you. Great. Well, that was really helpful out of the horse's mouth, as they say there. Great. Now we're going to pass over to Christine, who's going to give us some basics on actually what are they all about, friends groups, and why you would be thinking of setting it up. So I'll hand over to you.
So hopefully this is going to work. My computer keeps melting down, so if I suddenly disappear, I don't know, we'll have to go over to Liz, but hopefully I'm going to share my screen, if it's going to work. Now hopefully you can see that. Can you? Let's see if I can get it onto a slideshow. It's just everything's running on go slow at the moment. Here we go. So yeah, so looks like it's working, I think. Is that okay? Liz is talking, but you're on mute, so I don't know what you're saying.
Sorry, yeah, that's good. It's working.
Okay. All right. So friends groups, the good, the bad, and the ugly is what we've called our webinar today. So first of all, why have we called the webinar the good, the bad, and the ugly? One or two people have asked us that question. Well, friends groups can be a great asset to a church if they're done well, but they can bring big problems as well if they're not thought through and established properly and carefully. So do think before you jump into setting up a friends group. And we're going to look today at some of the advantages and disadvantages and the best ways of doing it. So first of all, just like Catherine was saying, before we look at friends group, the important thing is to engage with your community. So within your church, if you're not already engaged with your community, that's something you need to think about. Before thinking about setting up a separate group, you need to think about engaging properly with your community. So think about who your community is, the people around you. Think about the organisations in your village, in your town, and what links you have with them, or what links you could have with different organisations where you are. Think about events or community meetings that you could hold using your church facilities. So just as Catherine was talking about, having big events as a church, but involving the local community. Do you have good relationships with non-church members, both individuals and groups? And what would attract these people to your church? Think about what it is about your church that could attract people who are not, who maybe don't have a faith or don't attend your church. What would attract them to your church? Is it the beauty of the building? Is it the events you hold? What sort of things do they like about your church? If you don't have these sorts of relationships already, start to try and develop these relationships. Or if you don't have many relationships within your community, try and expand on that. Try and develop relationships with every part of your local community. For fundraising, many people set up friends groups for fundraising. You could use the PGS wider community scheme instead, which I'll talk a little bit more about later on, but that's a way of reaching interested individuals in the local community who might want to support the church financially. So what is a friends group? Well, a friends group is simply a group of friends of the church. So it's people who love the church and who value the church, but are not necessarily members of the church. They may be, they may not. So a friends group could be comprised of worshippers, of local volunteers, other members of the local community, maybe people who were part of the church but have moved away to a different place, maybe tourists who value the church when they're on holiday, or visitors who come to the church every so often. So these are all the sorts of people who might be part of your friends. And a friends group may be a few people, it may be lots of people. They may pay a subscription. Some friends groups, if they're set up for fundraising, set a subscription for people to pay, but that may not be part of it. And your friends group could be an independent organisation or charity, or it could just be a small group governed by the PCC. But either way, even if you're setting up an independent charity, it must be strongly linked with the PCC. So why would you set up a friends group? Several reasons. Firstly, people love your church. They love the beauty of the building, they love the history and the heritage, and what it means to their community. Some people just love it for the peace that it offers. They can go there and just be peaceful. Maybe they love the church grounds as well and the beauty of that. Many people have memories. Many people have been baptized in the church or married in the church, or their relatives have been buried in the churchyard. So there are a lot of memories connected with the church. So the church is of great value to a lot of people in the community. You might set up your group to develop links and relationships. It might help the church to engage with the community, as I've just been talking about, and build relationships that are mutually beneficial. The group might be a benefit to the church in terms of accessing volunteers from the local community. There are local people who have so much to offer: knowledge, skills, time, energy, ideas, all these different things that they can offer, and they can offer their volunteer time. Also access to funding. Sometimes a friends group can apply for funding more easily than the PCC. Sometimes it can be used to generate match funding for a grant that's being given. The group could organise fundraising, could organise events and all that kind of thing for the church. So that's benefit to the church itself, but also the friends group benefits the community, because the church building isn't just for the congregation, but it's for the community, and it's part of the local identity and the pride of the village or the community. And it's opportunity for people to support a building which is important to them. So when would you set up a friends group? Well, at the time that's right for you, when it would be of benefit to the church, and when you have the time and energy to commit to setting it up properly. You may set it up just short term for a fundraiser, or it may be a longer term thing. Yeah, for a specific task, I've said there. So that would be if maybe you were fundraising for something, for a building project, or you needed volunteer support for a project, you might set up a friends group for that task. Or you may set it up for ongoing work, for maintenance, for organisation of regular events. But set up the group once you have clear plans and a clear vision. Think about what you want to achieve. Think about your vision for your church and how a friends group would fit in with that vision. It's important that your church has a vision, has long-term plans. And if you're setting up a friends group, ensure that that will fit in with the aims and the vision of the PCC, and that you can work together. You may want to start a group to achieve a number of different aims: fundraising for a project or building work, organisation of events, improve relationships with the community, maintenance of the building or the churchyard, or volunteer support, all sorts of different aims for your group. But in what you want to achieve, think now, do you actually need a friends group to achieve these things? We've looked at all those benefits and all those things that you might want to achieve, but do you need a friends group? Can these aims and this vision be achieved in other ways? Can you engage the community through your own events? As Catherine was talking about, setting up their own events as a church rather than the friends group setting it up. Can you open up your building to more community groups? Can you develop those relationships with groups? research, as a church, research what community groups exist and try to build up those relationships. Can you find out who there is in your community who's got all those things that we talked about, those skills, the time, the energy, the knowledge? Can you find out who is there in the community and who is willing to support the church, maybe through a survey or through going out and talking to people, finding out who's there and who is willing to support you without necessarily having a group doing that, but as a church? Can you adopt the PGS wider community scheme? So you all know the parish giving scheme, whereby people in the church can give regularly to the church. We also have the wider community scheme, where there's a special leaflet designed to appeal to local people who are not church members. Could you use that to fundraise? And with that, you could go out to your community and show them how that relationship can be built up between the community and the church. So just think carefully about whether the Friends group is the right way, or whether all these things can be done without it. I've just got a copy of a leaflet here from our colleagues in the Diocese of York. This is sort of leaflet that you could use maybe when you're going out promoting the PGS wider community scheme. You could use this sort of leaflet. It's just to give to people to say, how can you help? How can you contribute to the life of the church? And it's thanking people for how they support the church and how they love the church, but asking them to maybe consider supporting the church further. And this is the inside of the leaflet. So it sets out the vision of the church, what the church is there for, how it has it says here, we have a vision to serve our community, to provide welcome and hospitality, and to invite everyone to encounter Christian faith. So it's a vision for the community and the challenges that they face. So this leaflet is to try and encourage financial support, particularly for the church. But this kind of thing you could use to go out to the community yourselves without necessarily having a friends group. I think I will stop there. So that just kind of gave you an idea of what a friends group is all about, why you would want to set one up. But that idea of thinking, well, all these aims, do you need a friends group to do it, or can you do it yourself? Okay, I'm going to hand over to Liz at this point.
Thank you. Right. Okay, go from Zoom slideshow. There we go. Right, so I'm just going to talk very briefly about how you would set up a friends group. And it's worth remembering there are two types of friends schemes. And in this section, I've added advantages so that I can go through a bit more speedily. The two types are, and now it's not working, resume slideshow. Why is that not working? Let's try this. Bear with, sorry, it's not clicking on for some reason.
Sometimes you have to just press it a few times when you're within the webinar and it will eventually work.
Right, hang on a minute, I'm going to, is it not? Sorry about this. No, it's not doing it. Right, let's go back, sorry. Stop share a minute. Right, sorry about that. I'm going to start again and find it again. Right. Okay, right. Share screen. And right. I'll check. Okay. There, it works. It works. Got there eventually. I do apologise. So, as Catherine was saying originally, saying from her point of view, it's better to be running a friends group from the church base. So, the two types of friend groups are one that's established by the PCC, and the advanced.
Full screen, Liz.
Pardon?
So
Say that again.
we're not seeing.
Oh,
We're not seeing it full screen. We're seeing it with your next slide at the side. And
okay.
then if it probably doesn't matter, we can see it though.
Why is it doing that? No, don't want to do that.
Oh,
Display settings. No. Why is that doing that?
It's fine, Liz. We just get to see
Okay.
your slides in advance. That's all.
Okay.
yeah, we can still see
yeah,
it.
do that now.
Oh.
Right. Okay. Sorry. There we go. Go back. Sorry about that. Right. So you can see the both things there. That the PCC established one, which is controlled by the PCC. It tends to be a subcommittee of the PCC. So you can create your own list of members and then co-opt onto the committee. Already has the charitable status, as Catherine was saying, you haven't to worry about that, and organises the membership fundraising events, and obviously donations can be gift aided. Setting up as an independent organisation, own charitable status, own constitution, exists to maintain the church building to help with that, with raising funds for that purpose. The PCC then from the church has to apply to the charity for those funds. It's seen separate to the religious activity of the church, so you could say that that might attract more non-churchgoers to supporting. And of course, the burden of fundraising, it doesn't then fall just on the church members, which is one of our big challenges at the moment in a lot of our rural churches where we've small numbers, and that's the big problem, is finding people to do that. What are the disadvantages? Well, for the PCC, their established friends groups, the big issue is the work falling on those church members. It could be seen that from the wider community that it's just seen as another churchy activity, and so therefore not for them. And if you are then going to go out to the community and ask for people to be involved with it, then it's more tricky in the sense of involving them into that or co-opting them onto that committee, unless on the electoral roll. Disadvantages, if you're an independent friends group, are things like the separate constitution, having to set all that up, bank accounts, insurance, logging with the charity commission. Other disadvantage, the PCC really don't have control over the funds raised. They have to apply for that funding. And as we saw with Catherine was saying, that potential conflict between the vision, the ministry of the PCC and the church, as opposed to how the friends see it. So there can be real clashes with those things. I mean, her example of the issue of removal of the pews was one of those big things. And as the friends group get more involved in this, in the church, in fundraising for the church, they see themselves having more say over actually what the church looks like, the church building looks like. So those sort of things are this type of disadvantages. We talked about constitution. I'm only going to briefly whiz through these because I want to hear from Casper next. Agreeing a constitution helps your group by clarifying those aims and objectives. As Catherine was saying, what do you want? What do you want your friends to do for you? Okay, so it helps do that, and it sets out the structure and the process and the procedures for management and governance, which are really important, and also gives that authenticity for HMRC, potential funders, partners and members, so they know where they're at. There's some examples of constitutions on these links here. Parish Resources has got a very detailed constitution, and I also recommend National Churches Trust constitution. It's a bit easier to read, or easier to read, simpler but more straightforward. So, but it's worth looking at both of those if these are the kind of things that you want to start. And here's a picture of the start of the constitution on the National Churches Trust website, the example of it. So sort of simple, sets it out quite nicely there. And then just to leave with those elements of a constitution, again, if you're setting up a friends group as a separate entity, these are all the kind of things that you have to think about with that. And you can see them all there going through: membership, honorary officers, nominations, rules of procedures at meetings, finance, alteration, the final dissolution, how do you shut it down? All those kind of things have to go into a constitution. It has to be decided and set up. So there's a lot of work needed in setting up a constitution. I'll leave you some useful links here. As I was saying, the National Churches Trust have a whole section on setting up friends groups, and that's the link to that. And then the Church of England Parish Resources, our favourite website go-to for all sorts of answers and queries about all sorts of things relating to churches and giving and buildings and finance. That's the link there to the friends schemes. And there's some links for both of those to examples of churches that have set up friends groups. Right, stop share. All right. I think before we go to any questions, I don't know if you agree, shall we move to Casper, and before then we open up to questions and discussions?
Yeah. And then I think after Casper's spoken, I'm going to promote you all on screen. So if anyone has anything to share, then you be thinking about what you would like to share. But we'll hear from Casper first, I think.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for inviting me on, Liz and Christine. I'm coming at this from a not altogether surprising position, some of which you've heard already, but maybe just a slightly different emphasis. The church, as we have said a lot over these last periods of period of pandemic, is the people and not the place. But here in Truro Diocese, we are blessed with hundreds of church buildings which have been houses of prayer for centuries in many cases. And the buildings themselves are designed to point people to God, aren't they? Not only in what happens in them, but even in their architecture. And ideally, in church building, it houses a church family which is welcoming to anybody who comes in. That's what we're aspiring to, isn't it? Not just for our services, but for any reason at all. And I guess you might agree that there are lots of people who are on some sort of a faith journey, but that faith journey for now stops well short of coming to a church service. But there's something about the peace and the prayerful atmosphere of that place that holds people's interests. And where that sort of atmosphere combines with a prayerful, thoughtful, imaginative, creative congregation, however small in number, which is genuinely willing to put itself out for newcomers, then I think there is huge scope and hope for that church to grow. And then at some point it will become entirely natural for that outward looking church community to share its own financial need, just as it is without any other organizations, with the community that it serves. And it might use words something like this: we in the church family love doing what we can to serve this community, but we can only do it if we meet our costs, which are X thousand pounds a year. Would you consider partnering with us, joining the parish giving scheme and giving the church £5 or £10 a month or whatever it might be, so that we can go on doing this thing? I wanted to try and make the point that the money matters of a church are tied up, for me, with its whole mission and purpose. For a church that is genuinely connecting with its community, to make itself vulnerable enough to go to a village, a community, for help, I think that makes a really powerful statement. And in my own benefice, we have 2 churches where we've done something pretty similar to what I've described. We have in various ways appealed to the communities that those churches are in. One's in a village, one's in Redruth itself. And because there's a real authenticity in how those churches interact with those communities, people have chosen to support us. This was even without, I didn't realise there was a wider communities brochure for PGS. I've learned something new. We just went with the normal one. This is a few years ago now. And it's not loads, it's probably about 15 different donors. And we don't make any attempt to distinguish between the life of the church and the fabric of the building. Those people just choose to support because they want, there's something about their local church that they simply want to support and to keep being there. Now, I don't know, I meant to ask Liz and Christine before that, the report from Mullion, has everybody seen that? Okay, oh well, there was a really interesting report that I guess Liz and Christine might make available later, from a Friends organisation that's been set up in Mullion, where there is, by all accounts, a thriving Friends, independent, fully charitable status Friends group. But there's a little bit in that report that really struck me, and that was this. It says, whereas church events can sometimes appear to be a little cliquey, Friends events can have a broader appeal, help break down any psychological barriers. Well, to be honest, it's no surprise to any of us, is it? If we're identified as a cliquey church, we've got some much more fundamental problems than just our money troubles. And I was keen, if I can, just to finish off, can I just put up some pictures here? Here we go, sorry. Let's have another go. So here's my top 5 reasons not to have a Friends organisation. And by this I mean the fully charitable status independent thing. I think, as we've heard already, that just there is some unnecessary duplication, 2 sets of governance that we really could do without. I also think, and we haven't particularly dwelt on this yet, that there is potentially a recipe for opaqueness and confusion and mistrust. And that might be within the churches, but it might also be between churches that find themselves in the same benefice. There is no getting away from the fact that there have been places where one of the motivations to do this was to hide from certain people how much money is coming into a church, and that strikes me as not a great reason. I think also, if we're not careful, it could prevent some of these typical sort of fundraising events that happen in all sorts of churches and that some Friends groups would run, also being faith-building events. It is in this list from Mullion, this fantastic list of events. I'll quickly read you a few. Music halls, gourmet dinners, musical evenings, horse racing, not quite sure what they mean by that. Easter breakfast, model railway, open day, wildflower festival, teddy bear jump from the church tower, Greek party, 60s disco, murder mysteries. Most of those, perhaps all of them, depending on your outlook. There's no problem at all about the PCC sponsoring those sorts of things, and you can do without all the qualms about different insurance and all of that stuff. Here's another one. I think the sorts of people who might be motivated enough to set up a Friends organisation from outside the church are exactly the sort of people that'd be fantastic to have on board within the life of the church somehow. Nothing to stop us asking people like that to be part of a PCC subcommittee that's particularly about fundraising. And then this one, it feeds the confusing misconception about the value of a church building without faith. I think what most people in a community value about a church is that it's a place, yes, it's a beautiful building in many cases, but it's also a place to gather for those key moments in life, isn't it? Whether it's celebrating a wedding or a baptism, or gathering to mourn somebody in this community at a funeral, or at a remembrance event, or the wonder of Christmas in normal times. And all of those things only happen because of the ministry that happens in a church. It's not the church building, it's the ministry that's going on, whether that's clergy-led or lay-led. And if you take that away, all you're left with really is a damp museum, isn't it? And one other thing here, we have at our disposal already, within the PCC financial system, we have the capacity to cope with restricted funds. If people particularly don't want to give to the religious activity of a church, but they do want to give to the fabric of the building, well, we can manage that within a PCC. But if you really must have one of these separate things, here are some things that I think are worth thinking about. That the impetus for this, as happens in the Mullion case, really needs to come from outside the church. Please let's not set up a separate thing from within the church family. And those trustees that you're going to have to find really need to be people who are passionate about this, super enthusiastic, bringing new energy and new money, and not people who press ganged into being on another committee because they can't think of a reason why not. Here's one other one. That church members, I don't think there can ever be a reason why church members should give to a friends organisation and are not to the PCC. And the last one, if you are in a parish that's part of a group, then it really can raise the possibility that other churches may think that you're trying to hide your money. And so if you're thinking about setting up one of these things, I really think it's something that all of the churches in a group ought to be aware of and content with. One other thing that I missed out, and that was in my rural dean capacity at the minute, I'm overseeing some other churches, and without saying which one of them has a friends group where one of the church wardens, as well as being church warden and treasurer of the PCC, because there is no treasurer and so it's defaulted to the church warden, also finds herself as one of the trustees, and because no one else will do that, it's also the treasurer of the Friends as well. I fear there's a conflict of interest. I haven't seen the Friends paperwork, but she's ended up with all of these jobs simply because there's nobody else to do them. And that seems to be an unhealthy and unnecessary state to have got in. So no surprises there, what I think about friends groups. However, I'm really intrigued at the idea of having some sort of more informal way of having something called a friends that is entirely within the PCC structures. That strikes me as an altogether different and more positive and less problematic thing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Casper. Well, that was really helpful, and a lot there to things that I hadn't thought of before myself. So that's brilliant. Thank you. Right, Christine's going to now. Are we going to update everybody?
Bring you up on screen. I'm going to stop recording, so don't worry that you're going to be all over the internet if you're up on screen.